The weight of what's left behind. I still remember the sound her spoon made when it hit the floor. A small, metallic clink. Insignificant, really. But for me, that sound was the beginning of the end. It was a Tuesday morning in January. The kind of morning that feels heavier than it should. Gray light, no wind. No noise except for the low hum of the fridge and the slow drip of coffee. Emma was sitting at the kitchen table, wearing my old sweatshirt, her hair in a messy knot. She looked empty. She had dropped her spoon because her hand was trembling again. Just tired, she muttered when I asked. But I knew better. She had been just tired for almost a year. Emma hadn't always been like this. When we met 8 years ago, she was radiant, the kind of woman who could light up an entire room just by laughing. She worked as an art teacher, always covered in paint, always humming some tune she'd picked up from her students. We used to dance in the kitchen on Friday nights barefoot, holding glasses of cheap wine, pretending the world outside didn't exist. But then life happened. Her mother died suddenly. Her school closed down. Then came the miscarriage. And little by little, the light in her went out. At first, I tried everything. Therapy, support groups, trapes, promises. I told her we'd rebuild, that would find a way to make her smile again. But she stopped trying. She'd sleep until noon, forget to eat, stare out the window for hours. Sometimes, I'd find her crying in the shower, silent, shaking, clutching the wall. Other times, she'd just sit at the table, scrolling endlessly on her phone, reading articles about depression, trauma, or how to fix a broken marriage. And yet, nothing changed. She refused medication, refused help, refused to see a doctor again after the last one told her she needed to push herself more. It wasn't just sadness anymore. It was bitterness. She'd snap over small things, the laundry, the dishes, my work calls. Every night ended in silence or tears. I told myself she just needed time. But time, it turned out, was making everything worse. One night, after another argument about absolutely nothing. I think it was about me forgetting to buy milk. She said something that still echoes in my head. You should have just left when I stopped being fun. I froze. Don't say that. She smiled bitterly. Why not? It's true, isn't it? You're still here out of guilt, not love. I wanted to protest, to tell her that wasn't true, but the words wouldn't come. Because somewhere deep inside, I wasn't sure anymore. The breaking point came 3 months later. I came home late from work. She was sitting in the dark again, the TV playing static. Empty wine bottles lined the counter. On the table lay a note, not a suicide note, thank God, but close enough to make my heart stop. It read, "You deserve someone who isn't drowning. I'm sorry I keep pulling you under." I found her upstairs, half asleep, eyes red. That night, something inside me snapped. Not in anger, not even in sadness, but in exhaustion. I sat on the edge of the bed and said quietly, "Emma, I can't do this anymore." She didn't look at me, just whispered, "I know." And for the first time in years, there was no argument, no begging, no pretending, just silence. The next morning, I packed a suitcase. As I walked out the door, she didn't say goodbye. She just watched, hollow-eyed, expressionless, as if she'd been expecting this all along. That was 6 months ago. Now, I live in a small apartment 2 towns away. I see her sometimes on social media. Still quiet, still sad but alive. Her sister moved in with her. She's been going to therapy again. And me? I feel guilty, because part of me knows she might have never started healing if I hadn't left. But another part whispers that I abandoned her when she needed me the most. My mother calls me a coward. My friends say I did what I had to do. But every night, when I close my eyes, I see that spoon hitting the floor again. That tiny, fragile sound that marked the moment I realized love alone couldn't save her. Sometimes, I dream about the life we could have had if she'd gotten help sooner. A baby, a little house with paint-stained floors, dancing in the kitchen again. But when I wake up, I know that version of us died a long time ago, somewhere between the grief and the silence. And maybe walking away wasn't selfish. Maybe it was just survival. Still, I can't help but wonder, does surviving make me the villain? Party when the silence broke. It had been almost a year since I left, 362 days to be exact. Not that I was counting, but the truth is, I was. There wasn't a single morning I didn't wake up wondering how she was. If she still slept with the curtains closed, if she still drank that awful chamomile tea before bed, if she ever forgave me for walking away. I told myself I didn't need to know. That moving on meant not checking. But then one night, it happened, a simple, stupid notification. Emma sent you a message. For a few seconds, my heart forgot how to beat. I didn't open it right away. I just stared at the screen, my thumb hovering over her name, remembering the sound of her laugh. The way she used to say my name like it meant something. When I finally opened it, her message was short. Too short? Hey, I need to talk to you. It's not what you think. That was it. No, how have you been? No, I miss you. Just that. I stared at it for an hour before replying. Are you okay? Her response came instantly. Can you come by tomorrow, please? I almost didn't go. I paced my apartment for hours, trying to convince myself that nothing good would come from reopening this wound. But curiosity, or guilt, or maybe some cruel mixture of both, dragged me there anyway. Her house looked the same but emptier. No flowers in the window boxes, no sound of music inside. I knocked once. The door opened almost immediately, and there she was, Emma. Thinner, paler, older somehow, but awake. There was a sharpness in her eyes I hadn't seen in years. Hey, she said softly. Hey. I managed to whisper. She stepped aside to let me in. The smell hit me first, lemon and something floral. The house was cleaner, organized. No bottles, no clutter. You redecorated, I said awkwardly. Yeah. Had to start over, she said, her tone light but careful. Tea? I nodded, though I wasn't sure I could drink anything. We sat at the same table where so many of our arguments had happened. For a while, neither of us spoke. Then she sighed and said, I didn't ask you here to talk about us. That stung a little, but I nodded. It's about my mom's house, she continued. You remember? The one upstate. I blinked. Yeah. The one she left you. Emma nodded. Yeah. I'm selling it. I frowned. I thought you wanted to keep it. I did. But she hesitated, tapping her fingers on the mug. I can't keep living in places filled with ghosts. I want to move somewhere new. Maybe Italy. I blinked, and sure if I'd heard right. Italy? She smiled faintly. There's an artist residency in Florence. They accepted me. I start in 3 months. For a moment, I couldn't speak. The same woman who once refused to leave the house for weeks was now talking about moving across the world. That's incredible, I finally said. Emma, she interrupted softly. It's because you left. I froze. She looked at me, her eyes steady but kind. When you left, I hit rock bottom. And I mean rock bottom. I ended up in the hospital 2 weeks later. My stomach dropped. Emma, don't, she said quickly. I'm okay now. But yeah, it was bad. That was my wake-up call. The thing that finally made me realize no one could save me but me. I didn't know what to say. My throat tightened. I hated you for months, she continued. I told everyone you were heartless, that you abandoned me. But after a while, I realized something. You didn't leave because you stopped loving me. You left because I stopped loving myself. Tears burned the corners of my eyes. She smiled sadly. So yeah, I got help. I went to therapy. I started painting again. Small stuff at first. Flowers, windows, then faces. My therapist said I was painting versions of myself I'd lost. She laughed softly. I guess she was right. I wanted to tell her how proud I was, how much I missed her, how I'd spent the past year convincing myself I'd done the right thing, but never quite believing it. Instead, I said, you look happy. She looked down, smiling faintly. I'm getting there. Then she looked up again. I asked you here because I wanted you to know I forgive you. For leaving. For giving up. For everything. That was it. No dramatic speech. No tears. Just forgiveness. Clean, simple, terrifying. And it hit me harder than any anger ever could. We sat there in silence again. The kind that didn't feel like punishment this time. Just peace. After a while, I said quietly, I never stopped loving you, you know. She gave a small, sad smile. I know. But love isn't always enough, is it? I shook my head. No, it isn't. She reached across the table, touching my hand, just once, briefly, before pulling away. I hope you find peace too, she said softly. You deserve it. When I left her house that evening, the sun was setting. Golden light spilling across the street, the air smelling faintly like rain. For the first time in a long time, I didn't feel haunted, just grateful. Grateful that she was alive. Grateful that maybe, in some twisted way, my leaving had given her the chance to live again. But as I drove home, I couldn't stop thinking about her words. Love isn't always enough. Maybe that's true. But maybe, just maybe, Sometimes love's greatest act is knowing when to walk away. Epilogue. 3 months later, I received a postcard from Italy. It was a painting of a woman standing on a bridge over the Arno River, her face turned away, the sunlight touching her hair. On the back, in Emma's neat handwriting, was just one line. I finally painted something that felt like freedom. I kept that postcard on my desk, not as a reminder of what I lost, but of what we both survive. Party what we leave behind, what we keep. 2 years. That's how long it had been since I last saw Emma. 2 years since that quiet afternoon in her kitchen, the one where she forgave me without asking for anything in return. I told myself I'd moved on, that time and distance had dulled everything sharp inside me, but I was lying. The truth is, some people don't fade. They just settle into you, quietly, permanently, like the hum of an old song you can't stop hearing even when the music's long gone. It was early spring when I got the email. Subject line: invitation. The Florence Collection, new works by Emma Cole. I almost deleted it. Almost. But curiosity got the better of me. Or maybe guilt. Or maybe the part of me that still whispered her name in the dark when I couldn't sleep. The exhibition was happening in a week. In Florence. I booked the flight that same night. Not because I had a plan. Not because I expected her to want to see me. But because some endings deserve to be seen through, even if it hurts. Florence smelled like sunlight and stone. Warm, ancient, alive. I walked through cobblestone streets, the air heavy with the scent of espresso and the sound of bells echoing through the narrow alleys. The gallery was tucked between 2 old buildings near Piazza della Signoria. When I entered, the room was quiet. Soft classical music playing faintly in the background. The walls bathed in gold light. Her paintings were everywhere, and for a moment, I couldn't breathe. There were faces, fragmented, luminous, all painted in that style that was unmistakably hers. Each canvas seemed to vibrate with emotion, grief, defiance, forgiveness. But then I saw it. The last painting on the far wall. It was called The Leaving. A woman stood in a doorway, one hand on the frame, sunlight spilling in behind her. Her face was turned away, but her shadow, stretching across the floor, reached toward a man sitting at a table, his head bowed. I didn't need to read the placard to know. It was us. My heart stuttered. I took a slow step closer. The texture of the paint, thick in some places, thin in others, almost looked like movement, like time itself caught mid-breath. I was staring at the moment I'd walked out, the moment I thought was the end. Beautiful, isn't it? The voice behind me was soft, familiar. I turned, and there she was, Emma. Her hair was shorter now, darker, streaked with gold, her eyes brighter. She wore a white linen dress, her hands speckled with paint. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then she smiled, that same quiet, knowing smile, and said, "You came." I nodded, struggling to find words. I didn't want to miss it. She tilted her head slightly, amused. "I didn't think you'd still read my emails." "I almost didn't," I admitted. But curiosity won. Her laughter was low, gentle. It always does. We walked through the gallery together. She told me stories about each painting, the people she'd met, the places she'd gone, the lessons she'd learned about herself. And as she spoke, I realized something strange. The pain, the heavy, choking regret I'd carried for years, had softened. Listening to her talk, I didn't feel like the villain anymore. I just felt human. "You've changed," I said quietly. She smiled. "You have to." "I'm not sure I have," I said. "You have," she insisted, looking at me with that same steady gaze. "You're lighter. I can see it." After the exhibition ended, we stepped outside. The evening air was cool, the city glowing under strings of soft yellow lights. "Walk with me?" she asked. I nodded. We walked along the river, the water glimmering beneath the bridges. For a long time, we didn't speak, just listened to the hum of the city, the laughter drifting from cafes, the sound of our footsteps echoing on stone. Then she said quietly, "Do you still blame yourself?" I looked at her. "Every day." She shook her head. "You shouldn't. We broke long before you left. We just didn't want to admit it." I swallowed hard. "I could have tried harder." "You did," she said simply. "But sometimes trying harder just means holding on to something that's already gone." We reached the Ponte Vecchio, the old bridge glowing under the moonlight. She stopped there, resting her arms on the stone railing. "I used to come here every night," she said. "After I first moved, I'd watch the river and imagine all the things I needed to let go of floating away." "Did it work?" I asked. She smiled faintly. "Mostly. But not everything floats." I looked at her, really looked, she was happy. Not the fragile, fleeting kind of happiness that depends on someone else, but the steady, grounded kind that comes from surviving your own storm. I'm glad you found peace, I said softly. She turned toward me. And you? I hesitated, still looking for it. Her eyes softened. Maybe that's okay. Maybe peace isn't something you find. Maybe it's something that finds you when you stop running. I smiled faintly. You sound like a therapist. She laughed. I've been in enough therapy to qualify. Silence again, but this one felt warm. Then she reached into her bag and handed me something, a small envelope folded neatly. What's this? I asked. Something I never got to say, she said. Read it later. I looked at her confused, but she only smiled. I should go, she said. People are waiting. Emma, I began, but she stepped closer, placing a hand gently on my chest. You don't owe me anything, she said softly. We had our story, and it mattered, even if it ended. Her touch lingered for a moment. Then she turned and walked away, her silhouette fading into the soft glow of the city lights. I stood there long after she had gone, the envelope still in my hand. Later that night, in my hotel room, I opened it. Inside was a single sheet of paper, her handwriting small and delicate. You once said you left because you couldn't save me. You were right. You couldn't, but you did something better. You gave me the space to learn how to save myself. I hope one day you forgive yourself the way I forgave you. There was no signature, just that. I folded the note carefully, slid it into my wallet, and sat there for a long time, staring out the window at the sleeping city. For the first time in years, I didn't feel the weight of what I'd lost. I felt the quiet strength of what we'd both become. Maybe peace doesn't come when everything's fixed. Maybe it comes when you finally stop wishing things had gone differently. And maybe, just maybe, love isn't about staying. It's about knowing when to walk away and still wish them the best. Part of the long quiet after 6 years. That's how long it took before I stopped replaying her voice in my head. 6 years before I could look at a sunset and not think of that last night in Florence. Her dress glowing in the lamplight. Her hand pressed softly against my chest as if she were setting something back in place. Life didn't become easier. It just became quieter. I moved to Portland, changed jobs, learned how to cook something more complex than toast. I even started volunteering at an art program for teens. Kids who used color to say the things they couldn't with words. Sometimes I'd catch glimpses of her in the way one of them painted. Bold, messy, honest. I dated a few people, nice people, but no one ever reached the same depth, and for once that didn't feel tragic. It just felt real, because some loves aren't meant to be replaced. They're meant to be remembered. It was autumn, the kind that turned everything gold and made the world smell like rain. And old books. I was at a small coffee shop downtown, grading some essays for a creative writing workshop I'd started teaching on weekends. Then I heard someone say her name. Emma Cole's piece is breathtaking. Did you see the article in Art Forum? My heart stuttered. I looked up. Two women were chatting at the counter, scrolling through something on their phone. One of them turned it toward the other, and there she was, Emma, standing in front of a huge mural. Her hair longer again, streaked with gray now, her smile calm, certain. The headline read, Emma Cole on Art, Grief, and the Quiet Power of Rebuilding. My chest tightened. She'd done it. Everything she once dreamed of, the gallery, the recognition, the peace. I should have felt nothing but pride. But there was that flicker, faint but sharp, of longing. Not for her, exactly, but for the version of myself that existed when we were still figuring out who we could be together. That night, I searched for her online. Her website was simple. White background, black text, her art glowing in the center. Under upcoming projects, there it was, Community Exhibit, Art and Healing, Seattle, October 14. That was 2 weeks away, and hours north of where I lived. I stared at the date for a long time. Then I closed my laptop, and for once, I didn't go. But fate has a sense of irony. 3 months later, I was walking through a bookstore downtown, my usual Saturday ritual, when I saw a new section labeled Artists and Journeys, and right there in the middle of the display was a book, Learning to Stay Still by Emma Cole. The cover showed a watercolor of an open window, sunlight spilling through sheer curtains. I picked it up. The dedication read, for those who walked away when it would have been easier to stay. Sometimes that's how love survives. I stood there for a long time, the noise of the store fading to a hum. Then a voice behind me said, you found it before I could tell you. I turned. Emma stood there, holding a coffee, looking exactly the same and completely different all at once. For a moment, the world went still. All the years between us folded like pages in a book. I thought you were in Europe, I said, managing a shaky smile. I came back, she said. Started teaching in Seattle. Needed a slower pace. I nodded, still trying to process the coincidence. Your book, she smiled. You like it? I haven't gotten past the dedication. Her eyes softened. It was about you. Well, about us. My throat tightened. You didn't have to. I wanted to. She interrupted gently. You were a chapter in my life. A hard one, but one I needed. We stood in silence, surrounded by shelves of stories, and for the first time, I realized ours had stopped feeling unfinished. We walked outside. The rain had started, soft, misty, the kind that makes the world shimmer. Do you ever think about what if? I asked finally. She exhaled, smiling faintly. I used to. But what if is just another way to stay stuck in the past? I like the what is better now. I laughed softly. You always did have the better lines. She nudged my shoulder. No, I just had better closure. That made both of us laugh. Then she looked at me, really looked, and said, you seem good. Content. I think I finally am, I said honestly. It took a while. She nodded. Me too? We walked a little further, then stopped at the corner where our paths would split. I'm glad I saw you, she said. Me too, I said quietly. There was a pause, the kind that used to mean something. Now it just meant understanding. Then she reached out and hugged me. It wasn't the desperate kind of hug you give when you're trying to hold onto something. It was the kind you give when you're ready to let go. When we pulled apart, she smiled, the same quiet, steady smile she'd given me that day in Florence. Take care of yourself, she said. You too, I replied. And then she turned and walked away, umbrella in hand, disappearing into the rain. I stood there for a moment, watching her fade into the gray. Then I looked down at the book in my hands, learning to stay still. It felt right that this was how our story ended, not with fireworks or reconciliation, but with peace, because the truth is, not every love is meant to last forever. Some are meant to teach us how to live better, to forgive deeper, to begin again. And maybe that's what love really is. Not a promise, not a possession, but a lesson in becoming whole even when it breaks you first. Epilogue. The quiet after the storm. It's been 10 years since Florence. 7 since that rainy afternoon outside the bookstore. Emma's book still sits on my nightstand. Edges worn. Pages marked with coffee stains and folded corners. Sometimes I reread it. Not because I miss her, but because it reminds me of who I became after her. I used to believe love was about holding on, proving loyalty through pain, endurance through chaos. But I was wrong. Love, I learned, is about release, about knowing when something has finished its work in your life and letting it rest. A few months ago, I got a letter. No return address, but I knew the handwriting instantly. Inside was a postcard, a painting of a small coastal village, the sky awash of oranges and pinks. On the back, just 5 words, I hope you found peace. I smiled when I read it, because I had. Not the kind of peace that comes from forgetting, but the kind that comes from remembering without hurting anymore. I placed the postcard beside her old letter, the one that once broke me, and now feels like a benediction. These days, my life is simple. I teach. I paint sometimes. I laugh more than I used to. And on quiet mornings, when the light hits just right, I catch the faint smell of turpentine and wildflowers, her scent, and I think, maybe some people never really leave. They just change shape. Emma isn't my unfinished story anymore. She's my favorite chapter. And maybe that's all love really wants to be in the end. Not forever, not possession, but a soft, lingering echo reminding you that you lived deeply enough to feel it. The end.